Greetings, my name is Christopher Paisley. I'm a Philadelphia public school teacher. This is my YouTube channel, Inside White Fragility. Today I'd like to pose 10 questions to Randi Weingarten on critical race theory. Now recently, Randi Weingarten, who is the American Federation of Teachers president, she was on Martha MacCallum on Fox News where they were talking about critical race theory. It was very interesting to see Randi Weingarten kind of dodge and deflect the questions about critical race theory because this educational approach is very toxic and polarizing, and it's very difficult to answer questions about it. So as Martha MacCallum was asking these questions, although Randi Weingarten kind of answered them, the specific questions about the 1619 project, which she really did oversimplify, the conversation never really got to the core tenets of critical race theory, and Randi Weingarten was really never held accountable for answering anything of real substance about critical race theory.
So I would actually say that I've had several conversations with Nicole Hannah-Jones, and I have not arrived at the same conclusion from her work as you have. But let's put it this way.
Well, that's not my conclusion. That's directly from their work. But go ahead.
I would hope that Fox would be just as focused on let's get rid of the misinformation about what happened in this election. This election was free.
Oh, come on, Randi. Come on. This is not the topic that we're here to talk about. I'm not going to talk about that. We've talked about that before, but that's a dodge, okay?
So what I'd like to do today is pose 10 questions to American Federation of Teachers President Randi Weingarten about critical race theory. Because I am a dues-paying member of the American Federation of Teachers and I am a Philadelphia public school teacher, I believe we should hold our leadership accountable, especially on approaches that are as controversial and at times polarizing, toxic, and divisive as critical race theory. So here are my questions for Randi. Question 1. Should we be teaching children that all white people are inherently racist? Well, I wonder what Randi would think about that. According to Robin DiAngelo and her white fragility theory and her book, White Fragility, all whites, regardless of your intentions, are inherently racist. All whites, by default, have privilege, and when they are silent and they don't get on board with the anti-racist ideology, they are perpetuating racism by default. I wonder what Randi would think about that. Same thing with Ibram X. Kendi. His idea of anti-racism is that all whites are inherently racist by default. Question number 2. Should we be teaching children that America is a systemically racist country based in white supremacy? What would Randi think about that? Jefferson County Public Schools in Louisville, Kentucky had a teacher training in August of 2020 where they had a slide that stated race is a creation designed to keep black people serving versus thriving in any system in the United States, which basically stated that the United States was designed purposefully to keep people of color down and not allow them to succeed. That was the slide. Again, America is a systemically racist country. It's broken. The Oregon Department of Education has an anti-racist math program that doesn't focus on rigorous or linear math, but actually focuses on disrupting so-called white supremacy culture in math. I wonder what Randi would think about that. Question number 3. Should we be teaching children that all racial disparities are the sole result of white racism? Okay, Ibram X. Kendi, author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, he actually proposed an anti-racist constitutional amendment which believes that any racial disparity is the sole result of racism, specifically white racism. So this amendment would not look at equal opportunity, but it would look at equal outcome, and if there were any disparities in outcome among the races, then those policies would be considered racist and changes would need to be made. I wonder what Randi Weingarten would think about that tenet of critical race theory. Number 4, should we be teaching children that you are either racist or anti-racist and that there is no neutral? Okay, again, this is Ibram X. Kendi's philosophy in his How to Be an Anti-Racist, which basically presents the fallacy of the false dilemma. You have to make a choice. It's either us or them. You're either an anti-racist who buys into the ideologies of critical race theory and supports all of Kendi's ideas and philosophies, or you, my friend, are a racist. And this is an approach that's being basically forwarded in K-12 schools all across the United States. All right, how do you feel about that, Randi? Just curious. Okay, question number 5 for Randi Weingarten, AFT President. Should we be teaching children that white America is an inherently anti-black country and that all whites suffer from an unconscious bias against people of color? This is anti-blackness. The Jefferson County Public Schools in Louisville, Kentucky are working on a black historical consciousness curriculum, which basically teaches that whites are oppressors and that they are eliminating so-called black joy, and that whites as a whole are inherently anti-black, that they unconsciously harbor these prejudices and this anti-blackness against people of color. In the Seattle Public Schools, they accused white teachers and white society of spirit murder, of basically being anti-black. I wonder how Randi feels about those stereotypes and those generalizations among the races. Okay, question number 6. Should we be polarizing children into tribal camps based on race and teaching them to view the world as oppressors versus oppressed, a very Marxist lens, a very Marxist way of looking at the world? The core of critical race theory across the board is dividing students into these camps. You know, whites are oppressors and they're privileged, and people of color are oppressed and they're victims. Actually, Martha did ask that question of Randi, and Randi did answer it. Here's her response.
Do you think that it's wrong to suggest to children that if they're white, they belong to an oppressor class? If they're black, they belong to a victim class? Do you have any problem with that?
I think we should be lifting up all ethnicities. I don't think we should say that one is an oppressor class and one is a non-oppressor class. I am a big believer in celebrating diversity, in actually looking at and helping look at people's lived experience. But if you're really talking about misinformation now, Martha, and I hope you are, I really would hope that Fox would really look at what happened in this election and how we can, because every social studies teacher is wrestling with this.
Question number 7. Should we be teaching children that things such as linear time, work ethic, the written word, the nuclear family, and rigorous mathematics are racist aspects of white supremacy culture? The National Museum of African American History and Culture this past July of 2020 put out a pamphlet that said just that these so-called aspects of white supremacy culture were things like work ethic and time management and the written word and all these things, which I used to think were just universal skills and values, but now under the lens of critical race theory, these things are being promoted as if they are white culture and they must be disrupted or eliminated. Wonder how Randi would feel about that. Just curious. Would be an interesting question. All right, question number 8. Should we be teaching children that so-called whiteness is problematic and must be targeted and disrupted? There's a movement called Disrupt Texts, and the sole goal is to get rid of whiteness in literature. White authors such as William Shakespeare should be disrupted. They should basically be taken out. And we need to bring in more voices of color. No one's going to disagree with the idea of diversity and multiculturalism, but targeting and disrupting whiteness would be an issue that people would have. There is a professor from Montclair State University in New Jersey, an education professor. Her name is Bree Pickauer. She recently published a book called Reading, Writing, and Racism: Disrupting Whiteness in Teacher Education in the Classroom. It literally teaches pre-service teachers, student teachers, that we must disrupt whiteness in order to bring about educational equity in the United States. Again, we need to disrupt or dismantle one group of people in order for another group of people to succeed. That is critical race theory. I wonder how American Federation of Teachers President Randi Weingarten would feel about that tenet of critical race theory. Okay. Question number 9. Should we be teaching children that being nice, cooperative, and compliant is racist and that white silence is violence? Okay, Jefferson County Public Schools in Louisville, Kentucky, they had a slide during their professional development in August of 2020 that said compliance and neutrality are acts of racism. Okay, D'Angelo also states that niceness is not anti-racist. So again, white silence is violence. KIPP Charter School founder Richard Barth announced that KIPP, this was in July of 2020, that KIPP was retiring its national slogan, "Work hard, be nice." According to Barth, the slogan ignores the significant effort required to dismantle systemic racism, places value on being compliant and submissive, supports the illusion of meritocracy, and does not align with our vision of students being free to create the future they want. That was the founder of KIPP Charter Schools. I am curious to see or to know what Randi Weingarten would feel about that tenet of critical race theory. And then finally, should we be teaching children that the most important determinant of success in their lives is skin color? Okay, Randi Weingarten, how do you feel about that? Honestly, should children be taught that the number one determinant of their lives and the success in their lives and their achievement and their success in school is identity, is the color of their skin? What would you feel? What would Randi feel about that? Now, although Martha did sit down with AFT President Randi Weingarten and try to have a conversation about critical race theory, unfortunately, she did dodge and deflect most of the questions, and it really did not get to the core of the things that we should really be talking about critical race theory, which is why I would like to pose these 10 questions to Randi so that we, the members of the American Federation of Teachers, dues-paying members, can get some answers on the topic.